Schatten's, ne? Oi wei. Kein schönes Spiel in Kabul, oi wei. Weißt? Buntik, Eikev Tuvshin Behe. Berichten wir, Mishem, irgendein Tedres kommen, Kapul, wir sind die ganze Kusche bei Eulam, Hand das Schiet zum Tinzarav, Hagun, Reb Yosef, Asayak, Menal, Iget, Beut, Geschatnes, Solomir, das wichtige Zehires, Mishatnes, was leider in sich schritt, mit getroffen viel mit Schales. Rabbi Yosef darf stürmen in der Welt. Es ist nicht nur der Ball, der Schales. Schales ist beguten von jünglichen Meidlich, was leider mit Check nicht gelegt hat, mit Schatnes, ist ein gutes Toffer, aber gut ein bisschen was zeigt, was dreht über die Welt, im Buch schon tausende Menschen kann hin, der Schier, das Schiss, man soll mehr verstanden, der Juni Schatnes. Halachic was sage Schlitte.
Es ist ein größer Covid, sie kommen reden für die Chushwe, irgendeine Schiritäre, selbst die Menschen, Revolt, sie können warten, Mamschach sein, es ist ein größer Harbusses Satire auf alle Unionen. Getracht, bewusst pinkt auf, was für ein Scheiches hat er heilig auf mit Schatnes, es mir weiß in der Halacha in Schuchnoch wird gepasskend, אז רוי לכל יראי שמיים שהמיצה ודייג על חורבן בית המקדש. So der Schale stellt sich, verwusst sagt der Mechaber darf יראי שמיים. אלא מאי, der Schuchnoch Mund von alle, als wir sollen sein יראי שמיים. Wir sollen werden מיצה ודייג sein על חורבן בית המקדש. Als man kijkt auf Hilche Schatnes, ihr seht eine interessante Sache. In Hilche Schatnes, der Schuch noch ochet Mund ihrer Shamayim. Der Chachma Sudan bringt in seinen Halachas, schreibt, Yirei Shamayim Yasem Malbishov Shelo Yeh Boshim Chashash Issa Lekula Alma. Sagt der Chachma Sudan, La Halacha, als Yirei Shamayim soll machen sicher, als alle seine Kleider sollen nicht haben, kein Shim Chashash Issa Lekula Alma. Das heißt, wir können nicht sagen, ich halte so, nein, wir sollen machen sein, also wie alle Schittes. Und wir sehen, der Mechaber, wenn der Mechaber ist Masbe, was ist Shia Tovi in Nis, es bei ihm ist es du drei Schittes in dem, in der Mechaber geht mit der Schittes Rambam, was ist der größte Machmer in dem. Verwus? Weil, also im Mund der Mechaber Mund, Yirei Shamayim, man soll paskenen, man soll chisch sein für die alle Schittes. So lassen wir überchazern, sagt was man schön Masbe gewähnt, aber noch von überchazern es geht, als die drei Schittes von Shia, Tovi und Nis, Shia ist, was der Tat von Shia meint ausgleichen, wenn der Wohl, wenn man schert es open the shop, it's all entangled, man darf es ausgleichen. Wie gleicht man das aus? See, here we have a comb, it's a wooden comb with metal teeth. We're going to take a lock of hair, attach it to the combs, and with a second comb, gehen wir das ausgleichen. Das heißt Shear. Shear means smoothing it out, straightening it out. The Targum of Yaakov Ish Chulak, as Yaakov is going to Ish Chulak, is the Targum She'ir. So She'ir meint ausgleichende Wohl. Nachdem Tovi, weil der Wort Schatnes macht, die ersten zwei Oisies, Shin Ayin macht der Wort Shia, der mittelste Ois ist Tes, was macht der Wort Tovi. Tovi man spinnt, das heißt man nennt die Hurilach, was man ausgekämmt, ausgegleicht, und man Wir machen von die Hurler, wir machen Afudem. Wie macht man Afudem? Sich nehmen, was heißt in Lushna Kodesh, Afulach. Das ist Freitag zur Nacht, man singt für Chapeho, Tomchu Folech. Der Eishes Chayil ist Doshot, Zemer und Pishtim. Der Eishes Chayil macht sich, es nicht durch den Scharnes in der Stieb. Der Chapeho, Tomchi Folech. Das ist Afulach, auf Englisch heißt es das Spindel. Man nimmt die Hurlach, man legt es auf das Spindel, und es fällt herab, und es dreht und spinnt der alle Hurlach zusammen und man macht Afudem. So das ist Tvir. Niz hat ein paar Tatschen. Ein Tatsch für Niz ist Shazira. So was meint Shazira? Weil ich darf du etwas tun zu der Fudem, es soll sich halten. Aber ich tue gut nicht zu der Fudem, es soll sich ausdrehen. So was darf ich du tun zu der Fudem? Ich darf machen, es soll sich halten, wie tue ich das? Auf dem darf man machen Shazira. Shazira auf Englisch heißt plying. Das heißt, man macht Achit Kufel, a getoppelte Fudem. So, das ist der Fudem, was man früher gemacht. Jetzt ich gehe es herumdrehen auf den verkehrten Weg. Und jetzt ich mache von ein Fudem a getoppelte Fudem. Das heißt Shazira, das heißt Achit Shuzir. Und das ist der Tatsch von der Wort Niz, laut der Rebbeinu Tam. So laut der Rebbeinu Tam zu machen Schatnis, müssen wir nehmen Achit Shuzir, a getoppelte Fudem von Zeme, mit Achit Shuzir von Pishtan, und wir legen die zwei Sachen zusammen, also wird wären Schatnis der Reise. Rashi sagt, es ist mehr. Was man darf tun, man darf nehmen die Zähme mit den Pishtan, man darf ausmischen die zwei Sachen zusammen. So das ist der Pishtan. So sagt Rashi zu machen, Schatnis der Reise, müssen wir nehmen die Zähme mit den Pishtan zusammen. Und man darf ausmischen die zwei Sachen von der Unheil. So man darf das Schier, es werden gemacht, zu den Zähmen mit den Pishtan zusammen. Man kämmt aus der Wolle mit den Linnen zusammen. Und nachdem, man spinnt, von der Gemischer spinnt, man spinnt auf Fudem, was der Fudem ist gemacht geworden, von Zähmen mit Pishtan. Und jetzt ihr werdet sehen, wie kickt aus Afudem, was da Taribes von Zeme mit Pishtan. Also ihr kickt aus Afudem, was da Taribes von Woll mit Linnen. It's an uneven thread, a thread that has enlarged areas, which is called slubs. It's agav. Es ist sehr neidig, ihr sollt sehen, wie es kickt aus. Verwusst? Ich habe jetzt gehabt eine Masse. Ich habe ein Rekel, which was sold at Emporio. It has no label what it's made out of. Es steht noch super fine 120s wool. Warte, man geht rein in ein jüdisches Store. Ein jüdisches Store verkauft nicht Schatnis. Und der junge Mann, was hat es gekauft, hat nicht beide gewähnt und hat es genutzt für eine Jahr Zeit. Bis ein Tag, einer hat ihm mal Eure gewähnt. Weiß, wie kriegt er Schatnis. Mr. He saw one of my presentations. Gewissen, wie kickt aus Footwear ist ein gemischtes Symbol mit Linnen, also uneven thread. Und hat gesagt, ich sehe, als dein Rekel ist ein Beged Chushit. Ihr sollt es beidig sein. Das Tage gebringt auf Bedika. The whole entire fabric is wool and linen. This is Emporio here on 16th Avenue. There's one, they have stores all over. Who knows how many of these were sold, and people, Posha didn't check them, just relying on the store. But that's why I took the moment to show wie kikt aus Afudim von Lot Shittas Rashi, as they will sehen, you see a fabric which is a tarivus. That dus can sein Schanes der Reise Lot Shittas Rashi. I was also not long ago in Edison, New Jersey, and I gesehen, as I won't be able to get back to Lakewood to be able to daven mincha. So I went into that Gouda to daven mincha, and while I was davening, a Mensch kimt heran, ungetin, mit Azamin Rekel. It has all these slabs in it, all these pieces in it. So, gewahrt bis es geendigt davenen. Ich habe gefragt, maybe I can see your label. He opens his jacket, he pulls out the label. It said on the label, wool and linen. He'd been wearing it also who knows for how long. And then he bought me another jacket which was also wool and linen. He didn't even think to read the label. Oh, but the fact that you see mezait a beged was a tarib was zait aus der gemischers, zama eure de mensch, as efshe soll es beidig sein. I can say that I see something, so I say something. And many times I've saved people from wearing sharpness. So das ist Shittas Rashi. Was Shittas Rashi mir wollt gemeint ist nicht also benimmt. Aber Shittas Rambam sagt, als man darf nicht haben die alle drei Sachen zusammen. Man muss nicht haben Shia, mit Tovi, mit Nis. Nur jeder eine allein macht Isse Schatnes der Reise. Was das ist der Mechumste Geschichte und das ist der einzige Geschichte, was der Mechaber bringt. Der Mechaber sagt, in Simen, Shin, Sif, Aleph, Kimish in Ischaber, hat Zeme im Apishon, Zad, Chiber, Ba'olam, Usse, Mishim Klein. Zeme mit Pishon, das ist behaften. Zad, Chiber, ist schön Usse mit der Reise. Und bringt einen Fall, Zeme u Pishim, Shetau von Se im Sebe, Shor Oisam, nimmt Wohl mit Linnen und kämmt sie aus zusammen, wo Ustu mehem Levudim und macht von sei Levudim, Harizeh Kelaim. Und also, der Taz redet aus. Der Rambam lernt, der Taz, der Wort Nis, meint Chibber. Das heißt, laut Rebbeinu Tam, Nis meint Shazira. You have to make it into a two-ply thread. Laut Rashi, Niz meint Ariga. And laut Rambam, Niz meint Chibber. Zad Chibber. Von Zeme mit Pishan wird schon Usse mit der Reise in das ist der Schittes am Mechaber. Verwus bringt der Mechaber nach der Schittes der Rambam und nicht nur, wir sehen andere Plätze auch in Hilche Schatnes, weil der Mechaber Mund, wenn es kommt zu Schatnes, darf man Chösche sein für alle Schittes. Man soll nicht kein Ungeteam mit Habeged, was ist außer viele Lot nur ein Schitte. So, es geht ein bisschen weiter. Man sieht, du beschleunigst, du nachher niederin, in der Unheil, der Schale eben Canvas. Canvas ist Schatnes oder nicht, weil das ist bei Ätzem. Der Mechaber sagt, als Canvas ist Tage nicht Schatnes. Aber ich kann bringen andere Poskim besuchen, als man soll machen sein, nicht nur wenn Schittes in Deutschland wird gebringt in Schuchnach, a viele von Poskim, was werden nicht gebringt in Schuchnach, die Poskim sagen, man soll auch machen sein, also wie die Schittes. A Digma ist wegen Canvas. Canvas ist Hemp in English. Was das ein Machlekes Rishonim, ob das ist Schadnis oder nicht. Weil die Gemurre sagt in solchen und andere Plätze, von wann weißt du mir, als Bad ist Kisner, Pishtan has a lot of different names. Einer von den Namen ist Bad, Beis Dalet. So fragt die Gemurre, von wann weißt du mir, als Bad ist Kisner? Sagt die Gemurre, was ist da, wa ha'oile Bad bevad. Every seed produces one stalk. So fragt der Rebbeinu Ephraim, einer von den Valatesis, as the Metzias nicht so. Every seed of linen produces many stalks. So sagt der Rebbeinu Ephraim, and the Torah sagt, Pishtan, es meint nicht linen, es meint nicht flax, it means hemp. And as wächst hemp. Every seed produces one stalk. Beschleimer redt euch, es meint nicht, dass der Rebbeinu Ephraim touch, halt, as linen is nicht Schadnis. Na, warte, wenn es steht in der Pishtan, meint es hemp. Aber linen is a part of the hemp family. It's all one mishpacha, so it includes also linen. But the Rebbeinu Ephraim is not coming to exclude linen. Und der Beschleimer bringt eine Reihe zu der Rebbeinu Ephraim, weil steht Baruch HaZoyna, Vatit meneim bepishtei ha'etz. Der Pusik, Baruch HaZoyna hat behalten, Kuleib in Pinchas, bepishtei ha'etz, in Stücklich Holz. Und man kijkt auf Pishtan ist steckelig. Man kijkt auf Hemp, das ist ein Stücklich Holz. So von der Pusik ist manchmal wieder bei einer Freien. Als Pishtan ist ein Stücklich Holz. So it must be, it's referring to hemp. Lemaße, der Beschleimer ist, man sagt, als la halacha, lemaße, ist also wie der Schuchnach und der Poskim, als hemp ist mit im Zimmer. Aber bringt, als Baal Nefesh, Amnam im Baal Nefesh reitze la hachme, lochush de Divrei Rebbeinu Ephraim, tovei ola bracha. Was für eine Brache? Es ist du ein Tamim in Hogim, der Tamim in Hogim bringt eine Masse. In der Tamim in Hogim auf Schadnis, in der Hagus bringt eine Masse, einer ist nicht geworden, ist raufgegangen im Beisen Shalmala, im Beisen Shalmala hat gepaskend, als muss raufkommen bei Gilgal. Hat nicht gewollt, hat Beisen Shalmala gesagt, als ob sein ganzes Leben ist Nisse gewesen, a viele von der Chashash von Schadnis, damals wird nicht davon raufkommen. In Kachava. Sie seht, als das ist der Tova la Bracha, das heißt, man weiß nicht, für Nisse sein, auf a Chashash von Schadnis, what is going to save you from. So what's the gear for ins for today? So today, there's a lot of recycled materials. Come out everywhere we turn. Every single day, we're checking and we're finding that in the clothing today, there's recycled materials. Now, was ist denn Niden with recycled? Paskum is gein azay, Paskum gein azay. So bechlau, was is recycled and was is the shala? So it's better to, the more we understand, the better it is, and azay, you can make the better decision if you want to be machmer or not. So was is recycled? Recycled is They take all, it's really started, the recycling industry started in the 1800s. When man gesehen ist nicht du genick natural resources, wool, linen, cotton, so they came up with the invention as was all take all the old clothing and recycle them. But sie haben gemacht ein Gesetz. When you recycle materials, there's not allowed to be any threads. It has to be broken down to the fiber form. Also it is ungeheben. The recycled industry, they didn't want a tarifs of a gemishes from fibers and threads. It had to be broken down to a powder form. So man sieht, Poskim was reden wegen recycled materials, and sie send this matter. You have to see when the tshuva was written. If the tshuva was written in the 1800s or in the early 1900s, then was, you have to see the tzura of the recycle that was then, and of that was the nidain at that time. So that time it was broken down to pulp, and memela there was no thread, so it was less shilas. So they abolished the whole Indian of recycled. And then they brought it back again in the 50s, in the 60s. But when they brought it back again, sie haben gesagt, man darf nicht simulen. It's enough if you just shred it. And I feel like du a tarifes von fibers mit threads. Ich habe Martbe gewähnt, was Food, was Hur, und was Chit. Das ist sehr neidig zu wissen. I showed you before. You take hairs, you spin them, and you make a thread. So before you spin it, it's a hair, it's a nima. Once it's spun, it becomes a chit. Once it's a chit kufel, then it's a chit shuzir. There's 3 steps. There's a nima, a chit, and a chit shuzir. So today, what's the recycled industry? Here's a pillow. Coming out of this pillow, you can see clearly, it's a tarivas of chitim and nimin. So here, there's a different shayla. Bechlal, the whole Indian of recycled industry is not the same as it was years ago. So even if you see poskim of 100 years ago, which are matter recycling, but this is different today. Because today, in the tarivas, you have chitim. And if you have a chit, so what's the need? And so what if I have a chit? So the Mechaber says, number 1, that a chit kol shehi is not butal. You have a chit kol shehi of linen, that doesn't become butal. That's in Simen Reish Sadites. The end Sif Aleph at the end it says, Ein leklayim shias, the stuken shia faklayim, afil a chit kol shehi shal tzemer. Beweget gulden shapishtan, ein kleiner Fudem in a größte Kleid von Pishtan, oder verkehrt, euch shal Pishtan betzemer, ussa. So ein Fudem kann schon machen der Isse. Also ich steht in Mechaber. Okay? But maybe there's another tzad laheta. The tzad laheta is chiber alidei dova'acha. Was du nach halacha in Simen Reish Sadites Sif Beis, as ha'oise beged kiloi tzeme gemalim oy arnovim oy canvas. I have a beged which is in ganzen tzeme gemalim, it's camel's hair. V'orag b'chit shal tzeme mitzad zeh v'chit shal pisha mitzad zeh. And on one end I have a linen thread, the other end I have a wool thread. Is a machlokes, the Rambam and the Rosh of dus Shatnez. The Rambam halts as dus Shatnez the Reisa, and the Rosh halts filling the Shatnez the Rabunam. So now you have what's an example? And where's the nidain of recycle that comes up the most? Is in shoulder pads. You have a shoulder pad. These are shoulder pads, which are sewn into a wool suit. And in the stuffing of the shoulder pad, this chitim. So you have a chit of pishtan, and that's sewn into the wool, but the linen thread is not necessarily touching the wool. There's a hefsek between the chit of tzema with the wool suit and the linen thread. So this is ochad ashad. This is tzad heta that they want to say that maybe even though there's chitim in there, but maybe the shittas that hold it's okay. So here again, it says Yirei Shamayim should be machmir like all the shittas, and there's a tzad according to the Rambam that it'll be also, even if it's chibur alidei davar achas. So memela, you should go with that. Now this. So when it's recycled, we open it up and we take a look. We have tviyas ayin. And our tviyas ayin, which the tviyas ayin is that's the training that we have, which teaches us how to identify fibers through seeing the characteristics of the fibers, and we can see which threads are more chashud, and we pick out those threads and we confirm it by putting it under the microscope. Sometimes we can see right away, and sometimes we need to use the microscope to be able to see. Only if it's recycled. But today, that's one example of recycling, which is an issue with the shoulder pads. So, now, there is also another tzad leser. Sometimes, in the taruvas, you have the wool also. And the wool is in the fiber form. And maybe the wool is only a miat. So we're talking about if it's a thread of linen in a beged of tzema, or it's a wool thread in a beged of pishtan, so then you have chibur alidei davar acha, which is a machlekes, which is lemasa, we should be machmir according to the Rambam. But let's say it's recycled, and we didn't find any threads in it. There is threads, but we didn't find threads of wool, and we didn't find threads of linen. But what we do find is we find fibers. You find nimim of tzemeh and nimin of pishtan. So you could say that l'chayr should become butel. Right? That's a halacha. There's hilchas bittel when it comes to shatnez. That's also mechab and siman reish sadites Sif Aleph, where the Mechava says, Semer Echelim and Semer Gemalim v'kayetze boi, shetov from zeh b'zeh. You took Semer Echelim and Semer Gemalim, you hat es gemischt, v'tova mehem tovui, you hat gespinnt von dem Afudim, so sagt der Mechava, im hoya ha'chetzi mar Echelim, if it's 50% sheep's wool, harei hakel ketzemeh. It has a din of tzemeh, the harei hu kelaim im pishtan, and it's shatnez, you're not allowed to take it. So if it's 50% camel, 50% sheep's wool, so it's also, you're not allowed to take that taruvas and mix it with linen. But if it's 51%, it's 51% camel, mutter le'arba im pishtan, you're allowed to mix it with linen. Okay, so there is hilchas bittel when it comes to shatnez. So l'chai could say, looking at the shoulder pad, even though we found some fibers of wool, some fibers of linen, but it's bittel because it's mostly cotton, it's mostly other things. So what should be the problem? So number one, if it's nicker, then it's a problem. So now the shaila is, who says we can apply din of nicker over here? Because really we have to understand why is there bittul when it comes to shatnez. The Noida Behuda asks, is heta beheta? When it's heta beheta, there's no bittul. So why is there bittul bechlal by shatnez? But the Taisus Yom to Lamasa goes, he says this halacha of shatnez goes al hilchas bittul, and in hilchas bittul, if it's nicker or is, it's not bittul. So if I have nimim, if I have fibers of wool or fibers of linen that are nicker, then even though it's a miat, it won't be butl. There's another interesting psak. Nikah doesn't mean that you can know that it's wool or know that it's linen. Nikah means that you can see different fibers. You see, for example, you see a thicker fiber and a thinner fiber, a shinier fiber and a dull fiber. So you can see in the mix, you notice different fibers. That's called nikah. That means it's not, the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is shetofan zeh b'zeh. The Lashon tofan zeh b'zeh, it was the camels, the tzemer echelim and the tzemer gemalim, which is similar hairs, they were blended very well together. That wasn't noticeable looking at it, which is tzemer echelim, which is tzemer gemalim. But you can look at a mixture and you can see the differences. I'll give you an example. We're down, sometimes you have a sweater, and the sweater is 6% wool. And we find linen, let's say it's sewn with a linen thread. So the linen is 6%. But if you look at the thread, in science, if you take a heavier fiber and a lightweight fiber and you spin them together, the heavier weight fibers will stay on the surface. That's what happens. Whenever you spin lightweight and heavyweight, the heavier weight is always on the surface. Now, why do they blend 6% wool in this sweater? What's the purpose of it? Why did they do it? 6%, sometimes you see 1%. I have a sweater here, it says 1% wool. It says here on the label that this label is 1%. It says 1% lana, 1% wool. Why did it mix 1%? They're stam putting in 1% because they want to give it a wool feel. What's enough to give it a wool feel or a wool appearance? By mixing in 1%, by mixing in 6%, by mixing in 3%. So because the wool is, and when you mix wool together with other fibers, it gives body to the thread. It gives more texture to the thread. And Rav Hillel David told me that he asked Moshe Feinstein, in those days there were suits that were made of 65% polyester, 35% wool. So it was a shaila of bittul, because the wool was only a small percent, was a smaller percentage. But Moshe, what? But the thread is a taruvus of polyester and wool. Made out of both. So the wool was only a small percentage of the thread. So there was a shaila of bittul on the thread. So Moshe said, since the wool is there to give it texture and to give it body, it has the din of a mamid, and a mamid is not bottle. So what I'm bringing out is that when it comes, how do you learn the bittul by shatnez? So there's one mahalach in the poskim that it goes through a hilchas bittul. If it goes through hilchas bittul, then you have the halacha of nikah. If it's nikah, ha'is is not bittul. If it's a maimid, it's not bittul. All the hill. What? Because the case of the mechaber is tzemer echelim and tzemer gemalim. So tzemer echelim and tzemer gemalim is identical hairs. And also the mechaber says shetofan zeh b'zeh. Shetofan zeh b'zeh, the poskim tide, is it was very well blended together. So it was blended together in a way that it wasn't nikah. That's how they touched the mechaber. It's really coming, that's the lashon of the Mishnah. So it wasn't, that's how they touched. So memela, that's one mahalach. So if you go hilchas nikah, so getting back to the shoulder pads, if the nimim are nikah, then it's not butl. But lamasa, the Noda B'Yehuda goes that heta beheta is not shaykh bitl. You only have bitl, hilchas bitl, when it's issa beheta, not heta beheta. What? Yes, therefore the Noda B'Yehuda, how does Hila pshat in the Mishnah? So Hila is not going out hilchas bitl, it's going, the din shua has to be done to the tzemer. Right? We learned shatnez is shua, tovi, and nuz. The shua and the tovi and the nuz has to be done to the tzemer, otherwise it cannot become a dava osa. So when you comb tzemer chelim and tzemer gemalim, if the roiv is tzemer gemalim, then we consider the shua was only done to the tzemer gemalim. It was done, it's nikra on the roiv of the chud. Wherever the roiv of the chud, that is what the shua was done to. We don't consider that the tzemer chelim had shua done to it. So memela, if you don't have shua, so memela it cannot become a davar asa. That's the mahalach of the Neder Yehuda. So therefore, it comes out according to the Neder Yehuda. Even if it's nikah, it still doesn't become asa, because it's not going al hilchas bittul. Okay, so this is very good if you're talking about raw fibers, starting from the very beginning. But if it's recycled fibers, if you took garments that the shua was done to it, the tvir was done, you had a beged tzemer, which was combed and spun and woven, had everything done to it, and then you shredded it, and then you mixed it into something else. So it comes out a big chumrah according to the Neder Yehuda. As long as this tzemer had shua or tvir done to it, memela, it can asa. So now if you have a shoulder pad which is filled with, which has wool fibers in it, even if it's the miyat, and it's in a linen jacket, in the summer we have a lot of linen jackets, so memela, that will be a problem. So what seems to be a kula, what l'chayret you would learning the Neder Yehuda, you would come out with a kula b'negei l'chaspital, it comes out of chumrah when it comes out to recycled. So just let me show you examples of recycled items that you may not necessarily think of. So we spoke about the shoulder pads. Another thing that we have a lot of recycled today is there's a lot of clothing that have pipings. You see, on the side of this beged, you have these loops. These loops are filled. There's a cord inside. So in one of the places, some of them, when we have a beged comes into the laboratory to be checked, a regular suit, we look at about 35 places. Even though it takes us a few minutes, but we're looking at 35 places, be'er. Sometimes more. We look at, people say, you checked, you didn't check here, you didn't check there. No, we look everywhere. That's in the Shevet Vosner, in Shevet HaLevi brings down that once a beged has a chiyuv bedika, you have to be boidekit b'chala mekaymes. You have to check it. You can't just, it's not sufficient to check it just in a few places. He writes, once it has a chiyuv bedika, so there's a chiyuv to be boidekit b'chala mekaymes. So here, when something comes in, we know what to be chayshish for, and we look everywhere. Sometimes people are surprised. Why did you look there? How did you know to look there? But this is the training that we had, and the training that we give over is how to find the shatnez in all types of obscure places. And taka, when something new comes out, we have a system how we spread the word, and we media all the boitkim. And boitkim that don't keep themselves up to date is taka a problem. So here, in this piping, in these loops over here, it's filled with recycled materials, and this is a linen beged. Inside here I found wool, so maybe the wool is bottled, maybe not, but based on what we just learned just now, that if it's recycled, even if we just see a miyat of wool, but that wool has a din of tzemer, and memela would answer the beged. Yeah. If it be a polyester and inside the recycling I find wool and linen, yeah, it would be a problem too. That's why we say any beged that has trimmings, you have to check. Just because in the trimmings itself you could find both wool and linen. beddings. Beddings also sometimes have a piping on it, decorative piping, where these pipings could also sometimes be filled with recycled thread. This one is also filled with recycled thread, and in the mix we found wool and linen. Here's a pillow cover also, which is linen, but in the piping there was wool. And here's a challah cover, which was given out by Rabbi Barnes, which also in the piping there was wool and linen. Okay, so I especially show this because there's a mishabura in Hilchos Beis HaKnesses that says a tablecloth is not allowed to be shatnez. So it doesn't say what size. So why is it usa? Because there's a Gemara in Beitza where the Gemara says a viloin, a curtain, is not allowed to be shatnez. Shamash mischamem boy, because the shamash would take the viloin and warm himself with it. So the extension of that halacha is also a tablecloth. That is something that you could use to be mechamem. So the memela, it's also. Now, also, another two things which is very important. Here I have a baseball glove. In the last month or so, I had a few baseball gloves that were filled with recycled materials that I found both wool and linen in the mix. And that I just had quite a few of them recently, and that's why I'm pointing it out. So even though it's a protective garment that you shouldn't get hurt, it's also usa. Now, used to be all baseball gloves were filled with recycled material. All of them were filled with recycled material. So you had to go either lekan or lekan. But today, Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of gloves that are not filled with recycled materials. And also, sometimes it's recycled, but I don't find no natural fibers in it. So yes, each one has to be checked. And what you can do is, if you want, if you're good, you can pull out from the holes. You can pull out the fibers. If you see it's colorful, then you know for sure it's recycled. If you don't see it's colorful, that means you can know for sure if it's no good. If it's all a solid color, you have to be careful, because sometimes it's a solid color, but there's the taribas of chitim and nimim. So you really have to be a shtickle of mumcha to be able to see. But if you see it's colorful, then you know for sure that could be a problem. Another one is oven mitts. One who wants to make sure that his oven mitts are good. It's not so easy. I find it's not so easy to find oven mitts that are not recycled. But this is a sif in Shulchan Aruch, where the Shulchan Aruch says, La yikach udam beitza chama. Soll nicht nehmen a heiße Ei bebeget kelayim beyudai shekiven shehu nitzel milechveis b'chaim ha-beitza chashiva hano kemnias ha-krev. So the Mechaber sagt, the Mishnah says, the issa of shatnez is geshomim mipnei geshomim, chama mipnei chama. Geshomim mipnei geshomim mean give you warmth, protect you from the cold. That's chima. Chama mipnei chama means protecting from heat. They shouldn't get yourself burnt. Shouldn't get yourself hurt. So the issa of oven mitts is chama mipnei chama. That's what the Mechaber says. So a lot of oven mitts are filled with recycled materials, and in the mix, it's very easy to find wool fibers and linen fibers.
Why do they make with action?
Yeah, they should. Richtig. This one, here's an example of an oven mitt, which is a little more interesting. It steht auf a label 72% polyester, 23% cotton, and 5% viscose. No mention of wool, no mention of linen, but the outside material has a linen look to it, and the inside is filled with wool fibers. Wool is fire resistant, So therefore they have an interest to use wool in the oven mitts. Okay. A few weeks ago, I was asked to do a house call. It's sometimes too difficult for people to bring all their clothing into the Shatnez laboratory, so they asked me to go to their house. So I do it as a service, just to help people get started. But this call that came in was asking me to go to Miami Beach. It wasn't asking me to come to New York or to Muncie. So it was Thursday afternoon, so I said Sunday, okay, I'll go Sunday. They said I'll go in the morning, come back at night. But it didn't work out. I ended up going Sunday nights. Something happened. And I go to the house Monday morning, and the husband shows me the clothing he wanted me to check. It was literally 3 jackets, a few pairs of pants, and a few sweaters. I'm thinking I came all the way to Florida to check such few things. So I spoke, so the wife was there. I asked if maybe I should check her clothing. She had a whole bunch of clothing. Then I checked the children's. And my flight coming back was 9 o'clock. And about 5 o'clock, I noticed the pillows on the couch were shatnez. It was mamish, wool and linen. It was wool on either side, and the trimming in the middle around was. So I said, my hi. And then I said, you know what, I should check the couch. And the couch ended up also being wool and linen. Now this was a huge apartment, and they had about 9 or 10 couches, all different types. So I realized I'm going to have to cancel my flight because they wanted me to stay and check all the couches. And it turned out that 7 couches were shatnez. So the person called me down thinking to check a few of his clothing, but he just moved into this apartment 2 weeks prior, and he must have had the feeling that there was shatnez in the home. And he called me down in emergency. He couldn't get somebody in Florida to come. So he paid me from Lakewood to come all the way down. Emergency.
Was it fixable?
So they weren't fixable, no, because the whole fabric of the couch was shatnez. But the landlord was going to replace them for different couches. Now, couches, this is a recent thing which I've had recently. Till now, I always used to say, couches don't need to be checked because the upholstery materials of couches and chairs are mostly synthetics, or even if it's cotton, but it's cotton and synthetics. But now there's custom, just like you have custom-made suits, there's custom furniture. A lot of people are ordering custom furniture. They pick out the fabrics, not thinking about shatnez. And then they pick fabrics which are wool and linen, and it turns out to be that it's shatnez. So I said over this story to somebody, and he said, you know, he was in his mother's house, and he had to get something from under the couch, from a chair, and he noticed the label, and the label said wool and linen. So he was shocked. So what he did was, he decided to paskin the shaila himself. So there's a sefer, a book of Hilchos Shatnez that came out from Rabbi Falk. So he had it, he opened it up, and it says over here in the book, soft seated chairs may be sat upon even if the seat is covered with wool and sewn with linen. Oh, he said, oh, okay, no problem. It's no problem of shatnez. But he didn't read the whole thing. He just read this part. He says, yeah, wow, you're allowed to sit on shatnez. Now really, be'etzem it's a machlekes. What's the machlekes? The Mechaber says, there's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Akarim v'akastais, ein bohem mishum kelayim, u'belvad shlo yiga b'sorei bohem. So the Mishnah says, "Me meg sitzen auf Shatnez, oib es ist du a hefsek." Jetzt du a Gemurre in Bayer, was die Gemurre in Bayer sagt, als afilo al gabe esse Matzois, ich habe 10 Matratzen, in der Intischte ist Schatnes, ich tue nicht sitzen auf der Oberste. Das ist du hast Stira zwischen der Mischne und der Gemurre. Der Gemurre sagt, als es Usse, afilo mit der Hefzig, in der Mischne sagt, es ist Mitte. So der Mechaber macht halachic zwischen Rachim und Kushim. Ob es ist Kushim, damals, es ist Mitte mit der Hefzig, ob es ist Rachim, es ist Usse. So now, there's a Punim Me'iris. The Punim Me'iris says, he's talking about the agulas, the wagons, that this was the case. It was wool and sewn with linen. So sitting on that seat, the Punim Me'iris held it was kushim, because it was filled very stark with koya fibers or very strong fibers, and it doesn't give, and Mamela has a din of kushim, Mamela is not a problem. Now, is the Mechaber going with that? No, the Mechaber is not going with that, but there is this side, and there's other studim leheta to sit in Gershatnas. But there's another point, and this is what the Rabbi Falk talks about before. There's an issa to lean on sharpness. There's an issa when you're leaning on sharpness, that's halo. Or when you sink into something, then it covers you. That's considered halo, which is a shaila of deraisa. So he just read the part of sitting, there's the seat. But a couch has a different part, it has the back and it has the sides. So even if there's poskim which are matter, for whatever reason to sit, but the leaning on it and you're sinking into it, that's halo, and that's lekila alma, that's a problem of sharpness. So when you learn, you need siyata d'shmaya to mamish to get to every prat to prat. So most upholstery materials are not a chashash. You don't have to be worried about all these things. Yeah, chairs, no. It's only by custom where we have a problem. Now, except if a person buys a couch or a chair and it says wool or linen, then you should check it. So I want to be Messiah. I started this year where it's brought how the Mechaber monza which be Yirei Shamayim, which should be machmer like all the shitas. Right? And to go to try with Ma'era also to be more nizha on recycled, even though there's sodom lekam, but there is serious reasons why one should be machmer even when it comes to recycled. But I want to end off with a more of a shamash. I saw a more of a shamash in the end of Pasha Shmini. You can look it up. Where the more of a shamash says, Afilu min davar she'ene osa elo mishum chumre ba'alma. Afilu fin azach was is usa na alsa chumre ba'alma yesh loy la'odam lizoy mehem. A person should be nizah. Now he gives the reason. He says, Afilu im yisnaig bedarche chasidus precious al kol atzdodim. Afilu a mensch is noig mit chasidus and precious v'shoiked al pischei Torah v'avoide yoyim v'layla. Ob es nish machmer, ob es mekel al atzmai, afilu bedover she'enei ela chumre ba'alma, es mekel, aber sag was ist nach chumre, lo yuchal lahasig, lo yochal lovoi lasogas ha-Torah. Sagt, ein Mensch zu sicher sein, sie hat sogas ha-Torah, mise machmer sein. You can look it up, it's in the end of Pasha Shmini. He says, being machmer, is that's how you zeicher to ha-sogas in Torah. So shoes also, today they use a lot of fabric. There's shoes made of fabrics which have the same thing, that if it's recycled, they could be recycled fabrics, and in the mix you could have linen or wool. So shoes have to be checked only if there's a fabric, if the exterior is a fabric, and Uggs also should require testing because Uggs are lined with wool on the inside. So in the Schiss wegen Lernen, wegen der Mitzvah von Scharnes und Weißleben is talisim. We had aturas which are filled with recycled materials, but we're still working on it, that they should make the aturas filled with pure cotton. Officially Ketzer was supposed to have done it, but yeah, now they're producing talisim in China. That's the latest thing now. A lot of talisim are being produced in China, which if one should check them. Yeah, because they're shame asemach on certain things. It's better to check it.
How do you know if the clouds from China? It says in the
It doesn't say no. You have to. So lama.
Which part?
So I find in the corners they have salvages, which is tucked in. So not only the ones coming from China. So you have to ask the person who's selling it to you. Maybe he'll know. Yeah, they're producing now because it's much cheaper. So they're producing talis cottons and talisim in China today. Since Chis about learning about the mitzvah today, at the Ebershon answer all in the tefillas, it says if you wear shartness, ma'akav the tefillas, learning about shartness is midah teva meruba. So in that Chis, all our tefillas should be niskabel, which is all zayin, yeshias, which is all zeiches on saying the Mashiach, the bini beis hamikdash, which should come very, very soon.
Beschäm wegen Schichem, stark bedanken der Vagun, ein bisschen Verzeih, für die mordige, wichtige Schie. Jeder will machen eine Stunde wegen dem. Aber man darf schon die Talisim checken. Oh, ihr weit, alles Guten. Was kann man tun? Man darf sich checken, von Kopf bis Fies. Man darf eine der Spanzen, die alle Senten, wo können checken alle Sachen. Nicht nur lassen auf ein paar Tzadikim allein, darf man nachher die Mitzvah. Auch da waren Leute, aber der Dinner für englische Teure mit Hashem ist nächste Montag, mit bei jeder kommen zu Flappers, mit Chazak sein, hat man gewaltige Chizik in der Luwe, Luchnis, aber Gashmiz, bis ja, das Schmeier. David gleich in der Journal, versteht schon allein. Aber ich habe mir schon mal gesprochen, sagen, es soll wegen Hibbel und mit schon einmal groß mit Zitke, Jagdl, Terviade. Amen. Amen. Amen, Heshmei, Rabbi, Mais, Barach.